She saw a dark sky before her, a few scattered stars here and there, leafless trees, and white snow that glistened despite the night. The forest she knew so well and loved had become a trap for her. For when she looked a little further, she could see neither the sky, nor the trees, nor the snow. Only a thick, black cloud that piled up so high it even blocked out the stars. Duiska felt an intense blow from behind. There were so many of them. The entire forest was filled with Werbers. She tried to hide, but they kept chasing her. Alone, she couldn't fight such a large number of Werbers. They behaved as if they had come specifically for her. Mainly for her. She no longer had the strength to fend them off or run away from them. She was already very tired. When they surrounded her again, they sent waves of white light toward her. This wave of white light, which caused her intense, excruciating pain, was coming from the mouths of the Werbers. Meanwhile, the glowing circles on the ears of these cruel creatures were draining Duiska's energy, weakening her. Duiska felt it was too much for her. She couldn't handle them. She couldn't fight them, not against such overwhelming numbers. She could only defend herself and dodge. That's why she decided to switch to defensive mode. When Duiskas switched to defensive mode, they grew larger and larger. She wanted to grow. She tried to make herself bigger and bigger, but she was so exhausted by the Werbers attacking her that she wasn't doing very well. She had to switch to defensive mode to survive the attack. If she succeeded, she might just manage to survive. The Werbers sensed her intention and began attacking even more fiercely. They were incredibly relentless, as if they knew she wasn't an ordinary Duis. They were willing to risk their own lives just to bring their master, Tumult, the good news, to announce that they had succeeded. After all, she was much stronger than a standard Duis. The Werbers must have been nearly as exhausted as she was during the attack. And yet they kept going. Could they have known she had special abilities? Was that why there were so many of them here? They had never attacked in such large numbers before. The Duis was so exhausted that her hind legs gave out, and she sat down in the snow. This reduced her chances, but she really couldn't go on anymore. A few Werbers pounced on her, to get even closer and attack her with greater precision. They began climbing and jumping on her. She focused on her inner self, mustered every last ounce of strength she had left, and after a moment, despite the massive attack, she began to grow and grow. Duiska's body was in excruciating pain. However, the more she grew, the more she shifted into defense mode, the less the Werbers' attack affected her. She finally did it. They couldn't do a thing to her. They were furious, enraged by their defeat, by the fact that they hadn't completed the task assigned to them. Duiska had never seen so many recruiters all at once in her life. If she stays in defense mode, they'll back off, but then they'll head for the cities. Surely some of them are already in the cities anyway, and people are fleeing and trying to hide right now. But if she stays in defense mode, the ones in the forest will back off and join the ones in the cities. With that many of them, will anyone be able to survive? If she stays in defensive mode, she won't be able to defend the people. Duis can't fight while in defensive mode. She'll only defend herself. There are so many Werbers around her that they'll be able to completely wipe out more than one settlement full of people. Duiska began to realize that it was pointless. Her species was flawed, and Tumult was producing Werbers on a massive scale. The problem was that Duis could help humans, but only to a limited extent. They were too pure, too good to be able to fully combat the Werbers' cruel energy. Duis cannot kill Werbers. They can only drain their energy permanently. But Werbers still have hands with which they can harm others. Besides, it is not easy for them to drain a Werber's energy permanently. A Duis usually drains a Werber's energy for a limited time. The Werber returns to Tumult, rebuilds its energy, and comes back to do the same thing. Duis cannot harm people in any way, not even the bad ones. Duis can influence bad people with their good energy and dissuade them from their evil intentions. They can almost enchant people for a moment, stir their conscience. They cannot negatively influence any being. They can only neutralize the Werber's energy through their own positive energy. In this way, they can save people. They can provide people with the proverbial antidote to the Werber's energy. They can shield people from the Werbers with their bodies, making it harder for the Werbers to reach them. They act as a kind of barrier. They can push the Werbers away from people. They can grab them and move them from place to place. But how many Werbers can they hold in one paw? A few dozen. With the number of Werbers currently in this forest, that's not very effective. It's not enough. The biggest problem is that the Duis can't kill the Werbers, but the Werbers can kill them. The Duis, just like the Werbers, lose energy and have to regenerate at some point. Then they're unable to help people. Duiska looked at the enraged Werbers. She looked at her paws, covered in white fur, which were almost indistinguishable from the white snow. She felt that none of this made sense. Something else was needed. A different kind of Duiska. And so she had thought about this before. If she didn't decide now, there might never be a second chance. Now she faced a vast amount of Werber energy. If she purified the Werber energy and added what remained of her own, she would create new energy. But giving up the last of her energy and poisoning herself with the Werber's energy meant only one thing to her. Deep down, she knew what she had to do. She sighed, looked up at the sky and the trees, and made her decision. So she returned to her normal state from her defensive stance. She shrank back to her standard size, and was now the size of a 6- or 7-story building. The Werbers were still attacking her, and her limbs began to give way. She closed her eyes, and did the last thing she could do. She used all her energy to create a huge white cloud. It was so large that it covered the entire forest. Nothing could be seen. The cloud was so dense and intense that it obscured the black clouds of the Werbers that were in the forest. The white cloud gathered them all, absorbed them, and returned to the interior of the Duis. Now, inside her was not only her own energy, but also new energy. The energy of the Werbers. It had entered in such vast quantities that the Duis collapsed. She had only a moment of life left. However, from this energy, from this new energy, a new type of Duis would be born. She looked at her body lying in the snow and at the white cloud swirling around her body. Small Duis began to emerge from beneath it. Before she died, she managed to look into their eyes and examine their fur. She had given birth to 8 beautiful little ones, 4 beautiful girls and 4 beautiful boys. The girls were green, pink, yellow, and red. The boys were blue, orange, purple, and black. Just by looking at their fur, it was clear that they didn't look like ordinary Duis. A standard Duis never had black fur, but for all of them, the base color was black, with additional colors on top. A standard Duis had soft pastel colors and a cheerful appearance, nice, sweet faces. These puppies, however, had the faces of beasts. Their eyes were not dark gray, but black, and they had sharp, large teeth. Shortly after the last Duis was born, the black one, the white adult Duis passed away. The black Duis was the last to be born and had the least strength, because he hadn't had time to gain it yet. He didn't quite understand the world into which he had been born. He saw his dead mother lying next to him. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. And he saw his siblings fleeing into the forest.
Why were they fleeing into the forest?
The black Duis, who had barely opened his enormous, equally black eyes, didn't sense the danger. Many things were still blurry to him. Not everything was clear. He didn't know that even though his mother had drained the energy from all the Werbers in this forest, and most of them had fled defenselessly to their homeland, Tumult, one nosy Werber had stayed behind and was now approaching the black Duis. The Werber was curious, and that didn't bode well. The black Duis instinctively began running with all his might toward the forest, but the Werber was close enough, and the little Duis was too weak, so he didn't get far. The Werber, drained of energy by the mother of the newborn Duisi, was powerless, but not without strength. It flipped the little Duisi onto its back and pinned it to the ground with its paw. It scratched its defenseless belly, from which red blood began to ooze. Then it stretched out the long, almost rabbit-like ears of the black Werber and cut off a piece of skin from his ears with its claw, so that the sweet, innocent ears would look more like those of the Werbers. So they would look like horns. It transformed their playful, lovable appearance into a terrifying one, as a symbol that Werbers and Duisis aren't so different after all. The Werber considered itself merely a smarter species. Werbers sought advantage at any cost, while Duisis chose the path of subjects. Disgusting. The Werbers served Tumult, but looked out for their own interests. And what did the Duisis care about? Human love. The very people who had just driven them out of one part of the country. Pathetic, seemingly strong, but in reality weak creatures. They fawned over people without getting anything in return. Werber was delighted with his amusing idea, and decided to leave the little Duis to certain death. Duis weren't easy to kill, but this one was a newborn. Werber believed that a newborn Duis, alone and maimed, wouldn't survive. It set off to return to his own country. It walked away, and then, unfortunately, it stumbled upon another hidden Duis in the forest. The second to last born, a red one, who was also weak. At first, it wanted to do the same to it, but it decided it had a better idea. It grabbed the red Duis in his jaws and disappeared with it into the darkness of the forest. Black Duis wanted to do something, to somehow save his sister, but he didn't have the strength. Covered in blood, he managed only to get to his feet and made his way to his mother's lifeless body, seeking comfort. As he walked, his paws left bloody tracks in the snow. Exhausted, he finally reached her and climbed onto her still warm body, nestling into her thick fur. He felt cold and warm at the same time. His mother's body warmed him, but the cold wind chilled his aching body. He wasn't sure if he could hold on, if he would survive. He wanted to look for something to help him, but he didn't even have the strength to stand up, or even move. He lay covered in his mother's fur and was losing hope. He looked up at the sky and saw his mother's spirit there. As he looked at her, it somehow helped him. He snuggled deeper into her fur and decided to survive.